The American Mafia produced exactly 8 bosses, so powerful, so ruthless, and so culturally embedded that their names alone conjure images of violence, wealth, and untouchable authority. Every murder, every empire, every decade of blood represents an escalation in notoriety, from political puppeteers to celebrity killers. That's why today I'm counting down the 8 most notorious mafia bosses in history, ranked from least to most infamous, starting with a man who controlled American democracy itself without ever firing a shot. Frank Costello. Frank Costello was either the most sophisticated criminal in American history or proof that organized crime had already conquered democracy by 1940, and I can prove it. Before you think this is just another glorified bootlegger story, hear me out. Costello didn't run gambling dens or smuggle liquor. He installed Supreme Court justices. A 1943 wiretap caught New York Supreme Court Justice Thomas Aurelio literally pledging his undying loyalty after Costello engineered his appointment. Not suggesting, not recommending, appointing. 2-term New York City Mayor William O'Dwyer was functionally his employee. When Costello wanted political favors, he called City Hall the same way you'd call a pizza shop. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. His slot machine empire alone generated $500,000 per day at its peak in the 1930s. That's over $9 million daily in 2024 currency. Nobody talks about this. Not from drugs, not from hits, from literal coin-operated machines installed in every corner store, candy shop, and bar in New York because he owned the politicians who would have shut them down. Here's the thing. After a 1914 weapons charge, Costello vowed never to carry a gun again. He kept that promise for 59 years. 0 murders directly attributed to him. 0 assassinations. 0 public violence. He built a 40-year criminal empire through handshakes, envelopes of cash, and knowing exactly which judge needed his mortgage paid. He lived in a Central Park West penthouse next to Fred Astaire. He saw a psychoanalyst weekly. When Vincent Gigante shot him in his own lobby in 1957, the bullet only grazed his scalp. Costello refused to identify the shooter and retired peacefully. He died of natural causes at 82. But if you think one mob boss corrupting democracy is disturbing, wait until you hear about the man who ran the most powerful crime family in American history, while living in a 2-story house and looking like your grandfather. Carlo Gambino. Carlo Gambino ran the most powerful criminal organization in American history while looking like someone's confused grandfather at a wedding. That combination made him more dangerous than every flashy gangster who came before him, and the numbers prove it. By 1970, the Gambino family generated an estimated $500 million per year, 500 soldiers, over 1,000 associates. They controlled the construction industry, the garment district, JFK Airport, garbage collection across New York, and the entire Manhattan waterfront. When you bought a dress in Manhattan, ate at a restaurant, or flew out of Kennedy, the Gambino family took a cut. Nobody even knew his name. But here's what makes Gambino legitimately terrifying. He entered America in 1921 as a stowaway on the SS Vincenzo Florio, hiding in the cargo hold, surviving on anchovies and wine. He was already a made man in Sicily at 19 years old. For the next 36 years, he kept his head down, followed orders, and smiled at everyone while quietly studying every boss above him for weaknesses. October 25, 1957, Park Sheraton Hotel barbershop in Manhattan. Boss Albert Anastasia sits in the barber's chair getting a shave. 2 masked gunmen walk in and open fire. Anastasia lunges at them, but he's actually attacking their reflections in the mirror. He dies on the barbershop floor with his face covered in shaving cream. And Carlo Gambino orchestrated the entire hit and immediately becomes boss of what's now called the Gambino crime family. Here's the thing that nobody talks about. In a 50-year criminal career, Gambino served exactly 22 months in prison. One 1937 tax case. That's it. Al Capone got 11 years for the same charge. John Gotti died in prison. Lucky Luciano got deported. Gambino died peacefully of a heart attack at home, age 74, surrounded by his children and grandchildren like a retired accountant. The FBI spent decades trying to prosecute him. 0 convictions. He looked so harmless that other mobsters thought he was weak. When Anastasia bullied him in public, Gambino responded with what witnesses called a fawning grin, while secretly planning his murder for 3 years. He lived in a modest 2-story brick house in Brooklyn. Neighbors called him the sweet old man who handed out candy to kids. Mario Puzo claimed he never met a real mafioso when writing The Godfather. But Vito Corleone is a Sicilian immigrant who leads a powerful family keeps a modest profile, discourages drugs, favors diplomacy, has 4 children including 3 sons, and dies of a heart attack. Carlo Gambino checks every single box, but at least Gambino stayed out of the spotlight, unlike the boss who pretended to be mentally insane for 30 years while running the Ivy League of organized crime in a bathrobe. Vincent Gigante. Vincent Gigante fooled the FBI, the New York Police Department, federal prosecutors, 22 separate psychiatric hospitals, and the entire American justice system for 30 consecutive years by shuffling around Greenwich Village in a bathrobe mumbling to parking meters. And every single second was an act. Before you dismiss this as just another eccentric mobster story, let me explain exactly what he pulled off. From 1969 to 2003, Gigante checked himself into psychiatric facilities 24 times. Doctors diagnosed him as schizophrenic with an IQ of 69. He urinated in public. He held conversations with imaginary people. His own mother testified under oath that he was mentally incompetent. The media called him the Oddfather. Meanwhile, he was running what the FBI called the Ivy League of Organized Crime. The Genovese family under Gigante generated over $100 million annually. 300 made men, the most disciplined, most secretive, most powerful of the 5 families. And nobody could prove Gigante was in charge, because the man who showed up to court literally drooled on himself. But here's where the deception gets genuinely disturbing. Gigante's security protocols were so extreme that no one in the family was allowed to say his name out loud, ever. Associates communicated about him by touching their chin or forming the letter C with their hand. He used Anthony Fat Tony Salerno as a front boss, who got convicted in the 1986 commission trial and sentenced to 100 years while Gigante walked free. Gigante kept running the family from his mother's house. His criminal career started with the May 2, 1957 assassination attempt on Frank Costello. Gigante walked up to him in his own apartment lobby, shouted, "This is for you, Frank," and fired. The bullet only grazed Costello's skull. A former professional boxer with 21 wins, Gigante rose through the ranks under Vito Genovese himself. His own brother Louis was a Roman Catholic priest who vouched for his insanity in court for decades before finally confessing. Was my brother the boss of the Genovese family? Yes. Then, on April 7, 2003, at age 75, after 30 years of drooling and mumbling, Gigante walked into federal court and admitted the entire thing was fake. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice, scratched an X on the plea document, chatted normally with his son, shook hands with his lawyers, told U.S. Marshals God bless you on his way out. Judge Jack Weinstein said he is a shadow of his former self. Here an old man finally brought to bay after decades of vicious criminal tyranny. The longest successful insanity con in criminal history, 30 years. And it almost worked. But if you think faking insanity for 3 decades is disturbing, wait until you meet the psychopathic pretty boy who murdered 30 people with his bare hands and accidentally invented Las Vegas. Bugsy Siegel. Benjamin Siegel had the face of a movie star and the personality of a rabid animal, which made him the most dangerous man in organized crime during the 1930s. That combination built Las Vegas and got him killed in the most brutal way imaginable. Here's the thing nobody understands about Siegel. He wasn't just a killer who happened to be handsome. He was a founding member of Murder Inc., the enforcement arm of the National Crime Syndicate, and personally committed more than 30 murders before age 40. He was reportedly one of 4 gunmen who shot Joe the Boss Masseria in 1931. When the getaway driver Kiro Terranova froze at the wheel in panic, Siegel shoved him out of the car and drove the murder team to safety himself. He was 25 years old. His nickname Bugsy meant crazy as a bedbug. He despised it. If you called him Bugsy to his face, there was a genuine chance he'd beat you to death with his bare hands in front of witnesses. Everyone called him Ben or Mr. Siegel. Everyone except the newspapers. But here's where the story gets truly insane. In 1937, the syndicate sent Siegel to Los Angeles to develop West Coast rackets. Within 2 years, he was living in Beverly Hills, dating movie stars, and having dinner with Clark Gable and Cary Grant. He looked like he belonged in Hollywood. Then in 1945, he decided to build a gambling palace in the Nevada desert called the Flamingo Hotel and Casino. The budget was $1.5 million. Costs ballooned to over $6 million because Siegel was skimming millions and having his girlfriend Virginia Hill deposit stolen syndicate funds in Swiss bank accounts. The December 1946 opening was a complete disaster. After renovations, the Flamingo finally turned a profit in 1947. Too late. The Eastern bosses wanted their money back. June 20th, 1947. 10:45 p.m. Siegel sits in Virginia Hill's Beverly Hills living room, reading the Los Angeles Times. An unknown gunman fires a .30 caliber military M1 carbine through the window. Siegel is struck multiple times. His right eye is propelled 15 feet from his body and found on the dining room floor. At the exact same moment, 3,000 miles away, three of Meyer Lansky's associates walk into the Flamingo and announce they're taking over. The timing wasn't a coincidence. The murder remains officially unsolved. The character Mo Green in The Godfather, shot through the eye while getting a massage, is directly based on Siegel. Warren Beatty played him in the 1991 film Bugsy. His death ironically made Las Vegas famous and proved the mob could profit from legal gambling, making him posthumously the father of Las Vegas. But if you think a psychopathic killer building Vegas is disturbing, wait until you hear about the Chicago boss who shared a mistress with President Kennedy, worked with the CIA to assassinate Castro, and got murdered in his own kitchen the day before testifying against them. Sam Giancana. Sam Giancana operated at the intersection of the Mafia, the White House, and the Central Intelligence Agency, which makes him either the most powerful mobster in American history or the most dangerous liability the government ever created. The fact that he got murdered cooking dinner the night before testifying suggests the second option. Before you think this is conspiracy theory nonsense, let me lay out exactly what's documented. Giancana simultaneously shared a mistress with President John F. Kennedy, worked directly with the CIA on assassination plots against Fidel Castro, and allegedly delivered the 1960 presidential election by manipulating Chicago's Cook County votes through Union control. JFK won Illinois by less than 9,000 votes. Without Illinois, he loses the presidency. Here's what the deal supposedly was. Joseph Kennedy, JFK's father, allegedly promised Giancana that, in exchange for delivering Chicago, the new administration would ease federal pressure on organized crime. Instead, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy launched the most aggressive mob crackdown in American history. The Justice Department's organized crime indictments increased 600%. Giancana felt betrayed. To this day, conspiracy theorists link him to JFK's assassination because of it. But the CIA connection is even more disturbing. Starting in 1960, the agency recruited Giancana under the alias Sam Gold for Operation Mongoose, the program to assassinate Castro. They gave him poison pills to slip into Castro's food. The pills never worked. The entire operation is now declassified. A World War II-era psychologist once classified Giancana as a constitutional psychopath. He received 4F status and never served. By 1960, Giancana had ordered over 200 murders. He was arrested more than 70 times. He was close friends with Frank Sinatra, secretly co-owned Sinatra's Cal Neva Lodge at Lake Tahoe, and had the Rat Pack perform for free at his Villa Venice nightclub in Chicago. His longtime lover was singer Phyllis McGuire of the McGuire Sisters. He lived like a celebrity while running the Chicago outfit, the same organization Al Capone built. Then came June 19, 1975. Days before Giancana was scheduled to testify before Senator Frank Church's committee investigating CIA Mafia collusion, he was cooking his favorite meal of sausage and escarole in his basement kitchen. Someone he trusted walked in. The killer shot him once in the back of the head, and then rolled his body over and fired 6 more rounds in a circle around his mouth and chin. A classic mob message about talking too much. The murder weapon was a .22 caliber pistol with a homemade silencer, 42 holes drilled in the barrel. No one heard the shots. Giancana was cooking for his killer, which means he knew them well enough to invite them over for dinner. The murder has never been solved. The CIA files on Operation Mongoose weren't declassified until 2007, 32 years after his death. But at least Giancana got powerful through violence and political connections. Unlike the man who literally invented the organizational structure, every single mob boss after him operated within. Lucky Luciano. Lucky Luciano is called the father of modern organized crime, and that's not hyperbole or mob mythology. He literally invented the institutional structure that every single mafia boss in this countdown operated within. The Commission, the 5 families, the National Crime Syndicate, all Luciano. In 1931, at age 33. Before you think this is just another powerful gangster story, understand what Luciano actually built. He abolished the boss of all bosses concept that had caused decades of bloodshed, and replaced it with a corporate board of directors where the 5 families voted on major decisions. He worked with Italian, Jewish, and Irish gangs when old-school bosses refused to do business outside their ethnicity. Meyer Lansky said their organization would become bigger than United States Steel. He wasn't exaggerating, but here's how Luciano got that power. On April 15, 1931, Luciano took rival boss Joe Masseria to lunch at a Coney Island restaurant. After the meal, Luciano excused himself to the bathroom. 4 gunmen walked in and shot Masseria dead at the table. 5 months later, on September 10, 1931, Luciano's men stabbed and shot the other major boss, Salvatore Maranzano, in his Manhattan office. They posed as police and used Jewish gangsters, whose faces Maranzano's bodyguards didn't recognize. Within 6 months, Luciano murdered both Mustache Pete bosses, who refused to modernize and seized control of New York organized crime entirely. Then came the Castellamarese War Purge. Depending on which historian you believe, Luciano ordered the simultaneous execution of between 40 and 90 old guard mafiosi across the country in a single night. The exact number is still debated. Sure, what's not debated is that Luciano restructured the entire American mafia in 72 hours. Here's what makes his story genuinely disturbing. In October 1929, Luciano was kidnapped by rival gangsters, beaten with pipes, stabbed repeatedly, hung from a warehouse beam by his hands, and had his throat slashed ear to ear. They dumped his body on a beach in Staten Island. He survived. The attack left him with permanent scars across his throat and a droopy right eye. He earned the nickname Lucky by living through an execution. Prosecutor Thomas Dewey finally got him on 62 prostitution counts in 1936, 30 to 50 years in prison. From his cell, Luciano allegedly helped the U.S. Navy secure the New York waterfront during World War II and assisted with intelligence for the Sicily invasion. In 1946, Governor Dewey, the same man who prosecuted him, commuted his sentence on condition of permanent deportation to Italy. Luciano ran operations from Naples for 16 more years, until he died of a heart attack at the airport in 1962, where he'd gone to meet a Hollywood producer about a movie deal. He was finally allowed back into America, only in death, buried at St. John's Cemetery in Queens. The FBI called his rise the watershed event in the history of organized crime. Nearly every mob structure that exists today traces directly back to what Luciano built in 1931. But at least Luciano built an empire through strategy and organization, unlike the celebrity narcissist, whose ego destroyed the entire institution from within. John Gotti. John Gotti was the first true celebrity mob boss since Al Capone, which made him a folk hero to working-class New York and a cancer that destroyed the Cosa Nostra from the inside. That contradiction defines his entire legacy. Before you think this is just about expensive suits and media coverage, understand what Gotti actually represented. He wore $3,000 hand-tailored suits. He appeared on the cover of Time magazine in a portrait by Andy Warhol. He held annual 4th of July block parties in Queens with free barbecue and illegal fireworks for 1,000 people. When he beat 3 separate criminal cases between 1986 and 1990, supporters tied yellow ribbons around trees, and crowds cheered outside the courthouse like he'd won the Super Bowl. The New York Post ran the headline, "I for Gotti," when a witness claimed memory loss. The nickname Teflon Don wasn't media hype. It was reality. Saw first acquittal in 1986, when assault victim Romuald Pichik mysteriously developed amnesia on the stand. Second acquittal in 1987, after the jury foreman took a $60,000 bribe from the Gambino family. Third acquittal in 1990 on assault conspiracy, despite recorded wiretap evidence. Each time he walked, Gotti grew more arrogant. But here's where the celebrity image becomes genuinely disturbing. On December 16, 1985, at 5:16 p.m., 4 gunmen in beige trench coats and Russian fur hats stood outside Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan during holiday rush hour. Boss Paul Castellano's Lincoln pulled up. The gunman opened fire. Castellano was shot 6 times, including a fatal headshot. His driver Thomas Bellotti was shot 4 times. Both died on the sidewalk surrounded by Christmas shoppers. John Gotti and underboss Sammy Gravano sat in a Lincoln sedan across the street, coordinating via walkie-talkies. After the shooting, Gotti drove slowly past the bodies to confirm death. It was the first unsanctioned hit on a sitting boss in New York history. Gotti violated every rule Lucky Luciano created. The commission never approved it. Castellano's death destabilized the 5 families. But Gotti didn't care because he was now the boss of the Gambino family and the most famous gangster in America. Then came his downfall. FBI bugs in the Ravenite Social Club captured Gotti ordering murders, and critically, disparaging his own underboss Gravano as too greedy. A furious Gravano became the highest-ranking mob turncoat in history. He confessed to 19 murders and testified for 9 days starting March 2nd, 1992. On April 2nd, 1992, and after just 13 hours of deliberation, a sequestered anonymous jury found Gotti guilty on all 13 counts, including 5 murders. Life without parole. FBI's James Fox announced, "The Teflon is gone." The Don is covered with Velcro and every charge stuck. Former boss Anthony Casso later said, "What John Gotti did was the beginning of the end of Cosa Nostra." Gotti died of throat cancer in federal prison in 2002, age 61, having destroyed the very empire Carlo Gambino spent 50 years building. But if you think Gotti's ego and media obsession were destructive, they're nothing compared to the man who became so famous that his name is literally synonymous with organized crime itself. Al Capone. Al Capone's name is literally synonymous with organized crime, which makes him not just the most notorious mafia boss in history, but possibly the most notorious criminal who ever lived. 99 years after his reign ended, his face still defines what the world thinks a gangster looks like. Before you assume this is just about bootlegging and Chicago, understand the scale. Capone's Chicago outfit generated $105 million annually between 1925 and 1931. The Guinness World Records documented this as the highest annual gross income ever achieved by a private citizen in the 1920s. That's roughly $1.8 billion in today's currency, from bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, and protection rackets. He ran this empire from age 26 to 33. He ordered approximately 500 deaths. An estimated 1,000 people died across his bootleg wars. When asked about the violence, Capone said, "I've been accused of every death except the casualty list of the World War." His weekly payroll was $300,000 for about 1,000 racketeers. He spent $401 on neckties in 1927 alone, wore $12 glove silk underwear, and listed his occupation on business cards as second-hand furniture dealer. But here's what made Capone truly terrifying. On February 14, 1929, at 10:30 a.m., 4 men walked into the SMC Cartage Company garage on North Clark Street. 2 were disguised as police officers. They ordered 7 members of Bugs Moran's gang to line up against a whitewashed brick wall. Then they opened fire with 2 Thompson submachine guns and a shotgun, approximately 70 to 90 rounds. 160 shell casings recovered. All 7 men died. The target, Bugs Moran, was running late and walked away when he saw the police car. No one was ever prosecuted. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre made Capone the first public enemy number 1. He also opened one of Chicago's first soup kitchens during the Great Depression and was cheered at baseball games. October 6, 1931. Capone stood trial for tax evasion. Judge James Wilkerson learned Capone had bribed the jury and switched the entire jury panel at the last second. On October 17th, he was convicted on 5 counts. October 24th, 11 years federal prison, the longest sentence ever for tax evasion. He to $50,000 in fines and $215,000 in back taxes. He screamed, "I'm not through fighting yet." He served at Atlanta and then Alcatraz, where he received 0 special privileges and was once stabbed with scissors by another inmate. By 1938, neurosyphilis had destroyed his brain. Released in 1939, he spent his final years at his Palm Island estate as what biographers called a virtual zombie, his mind gone. He died January 25, 1947, 1 week after his 48th birthday. Capone has been portrayed by Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Tom Hardy, and dozens of others. His name appears in Jay-Z lyrics, business articles, and history textbooks. Nearly 80 years after his death, Al Capone is still the first name the world thinks of when someone says the word mafia. That's not just notoriety, that's immortality. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.